Interesting. So being conservative, well, I mean, I suppose it shouldn't be a surprise that being conservative would be a predictor of whether or not one is likely to get married. But I've often heard it said that that's more to do with things like religiosity. But you're saying no, even a non-religious conservative, such people do exist.
I mean, when I kind of began this project, to be frank, I really thought I thought I'd have three groups to look at, in terms of like what I call the masters of marriage. Folks who are doing relatively well when it comes to getting married, staying married, and being happily married in the United States. So I thought I would have Asian Americans. I thought I'd have religious Americans and, and what I call the strivers or college educated Americans. Folks who kind of have this long-term orientation, doing well financially, have more social skills oftentimes, and just kind of, have the, some advantages when it comes to, getting married, staying married. But as I was kind of running the numbers, Louise, what I found was that even controlling for things like religion and education, I still found that conservatives were doing relatively better off when it came to getting married in the first place and being happily married in the second place. So that's kind of for me, that's one of the surprising things about this story is that, even controlling for the fact that conservatives tend to be, but are not always obviously more religious, you still find a conservative premium when it comes to marriage today. I think that's in part because there's an appreciation for marriage as an institution, and there's an appreciation too for many of the norms and customs that have classically attached to marriage and family life that actually end up still having a great deal of utility. Now, you and I both appreciate Edmund Burke, and he, of course, recognized that traditions often, but not always, kind of convey some kind of socially useful practice to us. And today, a lot of progressives discount, obviously, the value of tradition on many fronts. And of course, there are some traditions that need to go by the wayside. We can imagine what those are. But when it comes to marriage and family life, a lot of the traditions that have come up through the ages are ones that are helpful to us, and I think conservatives are more likely to appreciate. So one example is I find, for instance, that couples who have the same last name are more likely to be happily married. I think about this kind of as a sort of a team mentality. Kind of we're one. We share the same last name. We're the Wilcox family or the Johnson family or the Hernandez family, and having this common last name, gives, I think, folks a sense of a we before. It's one way of kind of operationalizing what I call we before me mindset, in the book. And couples who embrace this sort of we before me approach, this teamwork, kind of mentality, are more likely to be flourishing. Another example is I talk about just the advantage that follows from having joint checking accounts, which is more of a traditional practice, right? You kind of pool your money, share money, you're a couple, what's yours is mine and mine is yours as, husband and wife. And there's a lot of contemporary journalists and financial professionals who are, basically encouraging folks. I mentioned a journalist in the Atlantic, kind of encouraging young couples to keep their money separate. And yet we know that couples who don't follow that advice, are more likely to be flourishing financially and otherwise. And there's even experimental evidence that showed that when they randomly assigned newly married couples to joint accounts and separate accounts, this is an Indiana University study, the couples who were randomly assigned to joint accounts did markedly better in the first 2 years of marriage. So I think, again, one reason conservatives are more likely to be flourishing is they tend to be more open to a lot of these customs that have kind of sprung up over the years, centuries in some cases, that have some social value for marriage and family, even in 2024.
It's very interesting you talk about the random allocation to joint accounts, because what I was going to ask, and what I'm sure you're expecting to be asked, is how do we know that it's the practices themselves versus the people involved? Maybe maybe women who don't take their husband's last name are less invested in the relationship, or maybe, the feminist way, the way some feminists might describe this, to try and play devil's advocate, is maybe these women have particularly high standards for their partners. Maybe they're particularly unlikely to put up with terrible behavior, even put up with abuse. Maybe that's why you see these patterns between basically more modern feminist liberal practices and less durable marriages.
Yeah, I think that's a legitimate kind of pushback against some of the findings that I convey in the book. So on the shared last name thing, I can't make a causal argument, that's too robust, because I don't have we can't randomly assign couples to shared last names and keeping their own names, after the marriage. But as I said, what's great about this new study from Indiana is it's randomly assigning couples to joined or separate accounts, and it kind of gives us a sense of like, do you want to do kind of the modern thing, the more individualistic thing when it comes to organizing your money, or do you want to do the thing that is more customary and I think tends to promote a more we before me approach to your money? And it's the couples who are randomly assigned to that latter strategy who are more likely to be flourishing. But yeah, we can't. I can't, for everything that I'm finding, I can't say it's causal. But what I can, though, I think, tell you, Louise, is that the kinds of people who would embrace, shared accounts, and the kinds of people who would embrace shared last names, for instance, are also the kinds of people who are more likely to be flourishing in their marriages, today in the 21st century. And that's, I think, that at least I think can be somewhat surprising to a lot of progressives who tend to think that kind of embracing the newest thing, the newest norm, the newest fad is going to be the path to flourishing in your marriage. And there are many cases in my book where I can show that's actually completely wrong.